Sebab kita dapat connect usahawan dengan pasaran.
Market.
Itu kelebihan kita tu. Kalau even KPLB ni pun dia tak
komprehensif.
Dia tak boleh. Dia ada usahawan tapi nak pasarkan tu dia kena buat sendiri.
Tapi franchise itu quite big ni.
Dia actually dia kalau kat luar negeri dia bukan sekadar F&B, services. Contohnya orang mencari brand. Kata contohnya aircon, kata contohnya cuci Mr. Clean. Dia satu brand. Jadi oleh kerana orang confident dengan dia buat franchise. Jadi nampak Mr. Clean tu kira standard. Itulah.
Maknanya tu brand lah.
Brand. Dia orang kita pun ada brand. Tapi dia tak, bila dia masalah dia bila dia jual, dia tak ada promosi, kemudian dia buat R&D tak buat, jadi mati gitu macam dulu Tutti Frutti kan. Hebat, habis tapi orang hari-hari
tak nak sustain.
Tak boleh. Sebab dia tak ada macam McD ni, dia sebulan sekali ke apa, dia akan keluar
Benda baru.
Mainan baru. Jadi dengan budak-budak, dia segmen budak-budak suka mainan.
Putih-putih. Dahsyat. Kita ni semangat alam menik
Jadi tapi kita pergi dah mahal tempat lah, tapi dia tak ada
tak ada benda yang terasa very attractive. Terasa terpikat, rasa sayang, rasa apa?
Macam tilas. Dia harga dia tak tinggi sangat.
Mana affordable lah. Putih-putih
dia
kat Terengganu itu dia buat air buah jambu. Tapi tak payah tahu. Habis
sebab dia ni betul. Ada telefon. Dia tak. Kita semua dah sedar. Masih ada tu dia tak ada. Jadi orang lain boleh buat. Trademark tu tak ada.
Bosulik tak ada. Dia tak pegang. Satu rasa skill. Dia bukan just masuk buat dah. Dia kena ilmu.
Semua dah awal.
Semua ready
Tunggu tu. Tunggu mana letak si on.
Lepas ni kita buat yang bahasa Melayu pula. Permintaan untuk bahasa Melayu.
Untuk Melayu. Untuk Putra. Kita franchise player. Berapa lama kita dah rekod kita?
900 lebih. Cuma ada aktif, ada yang tak aktif. Ada yang dah, sebab dulu daftar tak ada tarikh mati. Sekarang ni baru kita pindah last year. Daftar dia kena renew. Baru kita tahu.
Renew buah ya?
Renew biasanya. Dulu kita peruntukan tu tak ada. Sekarang ni nak kuat kuasa tu kita kena pindah peraturan pula.
Kita peraturan pada pelabiran kan?
Saya tak tapi OBM nak pergi melawat apa. My Town tak ni.
Tak ada itu, tak ada postcard.
OBM pergi pasal
postcard tak ada. Ni.
Pasal postcard.
Pergi My Town.
Tak nak ni pasal rambut ni. SOP.
Apa macam mana SOP putih rambut?
Ada pakaiannya,
pakai PPE.
Kalau yang umur 60 tahun kata kena buat appointment, tak boleh ada orang lain. lain tu kena pakai PPE lah, macam
Macam follow lah.
tu dia pun tak akan naik atas sikit.
Senang di rumah. Yang mana? Profesor Azmawani ni from UPM
Yang Komuniti Putra Malaysia.
Dan juga untuk yang penilaian resi.
Dia mana member seorang MFA?
Dia kalau anugerah
Dia biasa member FA ni semua player ke ataupun just orang yang
player lah.
biarkan player.
Tapi ada macam bicara ni dia banyak terlibat dengan franchise punya industri.
Dia bisnes dia bidang dia kot.
Bidang.
Assalamualaikum. Now, can we start now?
Okay, teknologi. Ni tak perlu tekan push button ya betul. Dah betul dah tekan.
So, jangan boleh dengar Datuk dah testing langsung kan?
Boleh, tak ada apa. Aku macam sengit sikit. Video tak sangat apa ni. Cuma
Ini yang first webinar untuk KPDN lah.
kita. Tapi yang lain banyak dah buat ni. Bila sekolah masa tu. Sekolah daripada phase 1 CMCO dia buat dah. MCO. Ni ada naik ni apa ni? Start my video. Okey, dah boleh. Okey.
Okay, Prof.
Okay, looks like we have, can you hear me?
Prof, your voice, audio.
Audio. So can you hear me better right now? Can you hear me? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, testing. Okay, it looks like we have more than almost 70 participants right now. So, Assalamualaikum and good day to all participants. Welcome to the webinar, Franchise Management during Recovery Movement Control Order. This webinar is jointly organized by Ministry of Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs and Malaysia Franchise Association. I am Azmawani Abdul Rahman and I will be your moderator today. I would like to take this opportunity to give a very warm welcome to Yang Berbahagia Datuk Rosati Wahid, Deputy Minister of Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs. Pandemic COVID-19 is not only a health crisis, but also social and economic crisis. Subsequent control movement order has given devastating effect to the economy nationally and globally. The Malaysian franchise industry has given an important contribution to Malaysia GDP. However, as many business sector franchise business has also been affected, and this webinar is very important to all industry players as it will provide guidelines and best practices to ensure franchise business continue to grow and prosper. So we have 5 panelists who are industry experts and they will give us important insight on franchise crisis management. So before we start, without any further delay, I would like to invite Bahagia, Deputy Minister of Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs, to give his welcoming speech and to officiate the webinar. Please welcome.
Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you to our moderator, Yang Bersa, Professor Azmawani Abdul Rahman from UPM. respected management of the Ministry of Trade, Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs accompany me today, panel members for today's webinar session, yang bagi Datuk Seri, Datin, tuan-tuan, puan-puan, madam of seminar participants. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and very good morning. Let me first take this opportunity to express gratitude to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala because of His grace and His protection. We are provided with health to be here together, even virtually this morning. Today marks of the first day of our nation entering a new phase in combating COVID-19 after 3 months of strict control under MCO and CMCO. We are now in the recovery phase under RMCO, Recovery Movement Control Order, which begin today until August 31st, 2020. A lot more freedom is given to our movement, Alhamdulillah, and more economic sectors are permitted to operate subjected to the SOP imposed by the governments. But we must not be too complacent. It is important that we take the necessary steps to protect ourselves, our family members, and the community from the spread of the COVID-19. New norms such as wearing face masks, maintain social distancing, avoiding big gathering and crowded places, wash hands, and so on should be made a regular in day-to-day activities. As such, I believe the franchise crisis management during CMCO webinar session today is very much in line with the requirement of new norms mentioned. I was informed that the webinar is the first time ever organized since the implementation of Movement Control Order on March 18 by the government. Congratulations to the organizer, Malaysian Franchise Association, and the Franchise and Direct Selling Development Division of the Ministry for organizing this webinar program as an alternative approach to further the growth of our national franchise industry. Ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic hitting the world this year brought huge impact in the economy. Our beloved Prime Minister in his speech mentioned that the estimated loss suffered by the country as a result of MCO implementation is expected to reach 60 billion ringgit Malaysia. The outbreak not only affected local franchise business activities, but also hampered the government planned effort to expand the local franchise business to overseas market. Franchise Operation Review survey conducted by the Franchise and Direct Selling Development Division during the MCO period indicated that the local franchise industry experienced a significant decline in revenue. The highest drop reported was up to 70 and 80% from the franchise food and beverage and education subsectors. In addition, the issues of manpower shortage of raw materials, and operational costs such as rent and utilities are among the challenges that franchise businesses had to face during the MCO and the CMCO period. As such, there is a need for industry and government sectors to work together in identifying new measures and SOPs to ensure that the business can operate again with the best practice of safety against the re-spreading COVID-19. It is the aim of the government to ensure that businesses may return to operate at the optimal level of production and labor utilization as before. Ladies and gentlemen, the spread of COVID-19 and application of new norms have led to changes in the customer behavior. The demand for cashless transaction and delivery service for food and goods have increased significantly. As such, the use of cashless transaction is no longer a matter of choice, but it's a must for industry players in order to compete in the market. Fortunately, there are various cashless payment packages offered in the country right now, each with their own advantages. Pick up this opportunity to improve service to consumer, B2C, and business to business. In this context, effort toward the creation of new skills and enhancing the skill set of workers are also important and must be continued in line with the demand and requirement of the works. I'm sure that this matter will be addressed by our panelists today more detail during this session. Ladies and gentlemen, in effort to revitalize the trade and distribution activities, the Ministry is currently reviewing several proposed initiatives aimed to stimulating domestic retail activities as well as increasing consumer confidence in spending. The program is currently being fine-tuned, and I hope the entire industry will participate in providing support and insight through the upcoming engagement session. At the same time, several new approaches are being developed to promote franchise businesses to allow the players to reach out their target audience. Online interactive programs such as our session today will be held more frequently as another means to empower franchise businesses through information and knowledge sharing. The cooperation and support from all parties are necessary to ensure that COVID-19 pandemic crisis can be addressed as soon as possible, inshallah. This enabling economic activity to grow strong again. Ladies and gentlemen, my sincere thanks to all the participants who took the time to participate in today's webinar session. Once again, congratulations to KPD and HEP and MFA for the continued effort to support the development of the franchise industry in this country. To all participants, I pray that this webinar session will bring out good results, something that is beneficial to us in overcoming this difficult situation together. Let's pray for the best of our beloved country, Malaysia, insyaAllah. With that, thank you very much. Sekian, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you, Yang Berhormat Dato'. It was a very informative and insightful opening, and at the same time officiate our webinar. Before we start, I would like to highlight that each panelist will have around 30 minutes. And to all participants, if you have any questions at any point of seminar, please write down your question at question and answer session. Yeah. So our first panelist today, without having any delay, is Madam Director of Consulting PTE Ltd. She'll be sharing a topic on managing your franchise crisis. Yeah, and I would like to read a brief introduction on Madam Sian Naidu. She has over 20 years of consumer retail experience in the Asia Pacific region. Sian Naidu has been integral in the growth of many local SMEs. Her wide experience in handling key executive positions from varying industries allow her to venture through franchising, marketing, branding, and intellectual property protection strategies. Building on her passions to increase each client organization's net profit value, she founded Stream Consulting specifically to be agents of growth. As a certified senior practicing management consultant and scope IP and ICV consultant, Sian and Stream are committed to bringing innovative and relevant marketing insight to the business community. Her ongoing project partnership with Spring, IP Academy, IE Singapore, and FLA strengthen Stream presence in the region. So without any further ado, please, I would like to welcome Madam Sian Naidu to share a topic on managing your franchise crisis. Please. It's all yours now.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to put up my screen. All right, thank you very much, as usual, for MFA to include us in this seminar. The topic today is about managing a franchise post MCO, but I guess it's welcome to RMCO today. So without further ado, I just wanted to go ahead and start my presentation. And the fact is, we've just entered a world reimagined. And what has happened recently has really challenged all of us in terms of how we manage our business. In the last 3 months, we have, at least in a stream, we have been so busy in the franchise world. I would have thought that being in what we call the MCO world, our business would have slowed down. But in fact, over the last 3 months, we've had so many franchisors who have been approaching us because of all sorts of different situations that they never encountered in the past. And what made me realize was that everything that we learned in the past about globalization has changed. And today you will find that I'm going to start talking a lot about oxymorons, like, you know, the world of jumbo prawns, where local becomes global and global becomes local. And things have shifted so much that we have to actually reimagine the world that we are stepping into now in the world of RMCO. So I've been doing research, and then so I look at how the recovery outlook is going to be. So in the beginning, I was told, and I read, McKinsey says, you know what, we expect full recovery. It's going to be a V curve. Then after that, I heard that, oh, it's going to be a U-shaped recovery. After that, it became a L-shaped recovery. Interestingly, more realistically now, because we realize that there could be cases and reoccurrence of the virus and the infections, it's become a W-shaped recovery. So in my mind, I was thinking, is there enough alphabets in our prediction of what's in the future? The more recent one is a swoosh, like a Nike swoosh recovery. So altogether, I would say that your guess is as good as mine. So what I wanted to do as a disclaimer is to say that I'm honored to have a session to share with all of you, business owners today. But I would say that I can only share what I know in the last 3 months and what we read our leaders predict. However, it's almost everybody is an expert at the global pandemic recovery because there is no cure and there's no simple solution for us getting out of this, except that we should look at getting it out of this together. So in the Straits Times, I just pulled this up because, you know, it says that 100 ways the world has changed. And this is only one newspaper. I don't think you can cover all the ways the world has changed. Yesterday, I read a forward from another friend of mine who says that post MCO in Singapore, we have 10 additional delivery apps to compete with the existing ones like Grab, like all the other ones like Deliveroo and all that have already been in our playing field. So I'm sure in Malaysia, it's the same. So everybody has been pivoting and changing and reimagining their future. So the world and our immediate environment has shifted in so many ways that I think that in the franchise world, it is even more relevant. Why? Because franchising is about replicating successful measures and know-how that has been implemented in the past. So what does that mean for franchising? For franchising, that means that the franchisor needs to absolutely reimagine how they would come out of the MCO, how they would recover their business in the new world. And given that there are so many uncertainties in the new world, how do we predict the best next move, right? So what's happened is that in my world, the world has become smaller. It used to be that I could come to Malaysia, and there was a time I was coming to Malaysia twice a month, and I so miss Malaysia. I so miss my partners. I so miss Inchik Zainal, Derek, all my franchisors that I work with. But we have no choice. The world has become bigger and smaller at the same time. So we have a new look at our competition, all right? We used to compete locally with the physical territory that we are in, right? We look around and we talk about competition. We look at what's in Malaysia, what in our category in F&B are our competitors, whether they are chicken players, whether they are in education, whether they are in F&B, drinks, or even they're in consulting, like in my world. But what's interesting is that competitors that never used to be our competitors have actually moved into our territory. Of course, that's if you're looking at it negatively. Then again, if you look at it positively, you also realize that the world, as I said, has become smaller, which means that if you are in a business and you're able to pivot, the world also becomes your real oyster. You can actually make your business grow into other territories that you have never been. So let me give you an example. There are a lot of businesses that before, for instance, in technology, that used to only play in their own market. But hey, suddenly we have so many international players in our backyard, and people that never used to compete with us are competing. So, and then on another scale, if you are a local player in your education business and global pandemic has actually hit your business, you cannot continue because you're paying, especially in Singapore, we're paying crazy rentals, and we have to keep our employees hired. And of course, our government has helped us, but still the running costs, and we're not running at 100%. And if before going into the pandemic crisis, we were already in a disadvantaged position financially, a lot of franchisors were in trouble. But what we found interesting was that in this crisis, there were also opportunities. So there were people who always wanted to get into education, but never ever thought about it. But then there are all these franchisors who were not prepared for the pandemic, and they need help. So when the franchisees asked me, well, you know, franchisors want to let go of, you know, some of their outlets, or the franchisees, the existing franchisees cannot hold on. What do you think is the success rate of, you know, us taking over a business unit like this or a franchise like this? So one of the answers is that the fact that whilst a business is global, it can become very hyper-local as well. This means that whilst we are all in shutdown mode and travel cannot happen, the first businesses to recover are your local businesses, the local businesses that actually serve our local communities. So what's interesting is that in every crisis, there is an opportunity. And I use a Chinese word, so forgive me, but recently I also was inspired by our own Prime Minister who talked about wresting opportunity from danger. And in Chinese, this really is very relevant in today's environment. All right, so hyper-localization has happened, and it's a real thing. So in terms of opportunities that has emerged, you can see that whilst the world has become changed, there's actually a lot of new opportunities where there are new personas, there are new target markets that you can approach. For instance, there are people that are the social citizen, which means in terms of advertising, you can become more focused and more targeted. The homebody who look for more entertainment, the sad and the confused people who actually seek teleconsulting. There are the health nuts that actually look at buying more supplements and look at fitness apps and stuff like that. So you will see that actually, even if the world has changed, it's actually every franchisor's responsibility to see how they can reimagine their business, right? So the idea is goodbye hyper-globalization and hello hyper-localization. So that's where earlier I was telling you about the micro-segmentation. So that means in every sector from, you know, like I'm sure it's the same where you live. In Singapore, we have daughters match up with their mothers and their fathers to actually order food online and order fresh fish, order fresh vegetables. They form seafood groups so that they can buy in bulk. location delivery apps have actually happened. So for instance, if they are all neighbors, they have collaborated so that they can have they can bundle their products and they can sell their products to nearby communities so that they can actually leverage their community connections. Contactless retail, as Dato said earlier, focus on local warehousing and last mile delivery. Those are all really, really real things that have changed in terms of hyper-localization. So leveraging technology is what everybody has been doing, right? And the restricted movement, the speeding of deglobalization, go global but operate local is now more real than ever. Okay, but what I want to say is actually COVID-19 is not the cause for this increase in dependency of technology and the localization, but it is actually speeded it up a lot, all right? And the emergence of this self-sustaining cities and potential hyper-localization is where countries become less dependent on each other, but we have no choice. But whilst we are not so dependent on each other, we still have to keep ourselves open because competition is now local and international simultaneously, right? So how does this affect the franchise community? So, well, over the last 3 months, I've been moderating with Franchise License Association pretty actively. And this is some of the summaries that has happened. All right. So what was done to help franchise community during the MCO, like from the franchisors? So what have some of the franchisors said? So they ran a lot of activities to support their franchisees. And what did they do? A lot of franchisors said that they communicated more with their franchisees. They tried to help their franchisees by, reducing their waivers. For instance, franchise royalties, a lot of them were waived. Some of them followed the government, which means if the government gives 50% waiver, the franchisors also gave the franchisees waivers. Or in terms of additional fees or minimum quantity orders, they actually reduced those. They also gave guidance on navigating everyday new rules. During the MCO period, there's a lot of new rules that happen because, like I said earlier, it's everybody's new at this, so we have to learn. And so we keep implementing new things with new lessons that we learn, unfortunately, almost on a daily basis. So there were new restrictions, new regulations. So especially if you're an FMB, the changes were even more dramatic. So there was also practical assistance that the franchisors gave with the landlords. And then there are also sudden changes of needs for new application. For instance, if you're an FMB and you used to only sell, you're a restaurant, but you are not in the takeaway business, you need new licenses. Those are all things that franchisors needed to step in to help their franchisees so that they could at least pivot to serve the takeaway business, for instance. Halal certifications and many changes also needed to be put in place because if you are a restaurant and your food is only for sit-in, then there is a need for you to restructure your menu. But if you restructure your menu as in the straightforward way, you might actually face a lot of resistance. So then franchisors have to think innovatively and creatively about how to pivot that change. Then there were a lot of people who talked about focusing on innovation, where they made lemonade from lemons. So that new ideas emerged in terms of collaboration, in terms of group buys, pre-ordering, subscriptions, cloud kitchen live streamings, and some education companies even developed activity kits so that they could entertain the children, or some cafes started to build bake it yourself kits so that families could get together and do their own baking activities at home. And surprisingly, a client of mine called Joe & Doe, their revenue selling straight from their central kitchen was very, very well received. And for instance, as a client, every time I order, I end up ordering over $60 Singapore per time I order. When I used to go to Joe & Doe, I would spend, even for a very expensive latte, at $6.50, which is, I guess, about 1950 ringgit each time I go for a coffee. I actually now end up spending even more, and I order on a bi-weekly basis. So I would say that there are some winners. Obviously, there are also some losers in this situation. But people who were able to pivot actually still, although revenue is down all around, they still managed to survive. And the other thing that I wanted to say that the franchisors here in Singapore tried to do was to make their changes to be future ready. So a lot of franchisors started to leverage technology. So the way forward, again, I can only give you some ideas and indications, but like I said, everything is changing still every day. We don't know how this pandemic is going to evolve, but here are some ideas, all right? So McKinsey is saying that during this current crisis, businesses have worked faster and better than they dreamed possible just a few months ago. I don't know how many of you will agree, but for me, it is true. In fact, that I work so much that unfortunately there's no day, there's no night, because we are stuck at home and we're working. So during this crisis, I entertained far more franchisors than I have sometimes in 1 year, because on a daily basis, we have franchisors seeking help to either digitize their system, to find new franchisees, to replace existing franchisees, to release their current locations. And so at the end of the day, the amount of strategy and planning that has been going on during these last 3 months have been actually phenomenal. So the way forward, what I would say is that rapidly we have to recover revenue in this RMCO time. Now, what does that mean? So, franchisors are under stress. Franchisees are also under stress. So franchisors are doing their best to, reduce the burden or help out the franchisees. And earlier on, I was saying that a lot of franchisors are reducing fees that the franchisees have to pay. But really, at the end of the day, is it enough for that to happen only? What the franchisees really need is not just a relief. What we need is to find ways to recover revenue, right? So this might mean that we need to find new marketing ways and recover faster, which means that we need to understand the changes in development in our consumer mindset, our consumer segmentation. And earlier I talked about hyper and micro segmentation. How can we look at our business and target specific segments so that we can, whilst we may not be able to capture the entire market, we can capture smaller and more segmented pieces of the market that suit the way we serve our products. That means that you might actually have to come up with strategies that are perhaps adjusting your pricing, your promotions. You might need to rely on data that maybe last time you didn't need to rely so much on. You might need to create more flexible payment terms, digitize your sales channels, or maybe even automating your processes so that you can up your sales representation more, relying on online marketing as well. And then you need to also have a different mindset, and we call it the startup mindset. It doesn't matter if you're 20 years in the business already. We actually have to go back to basics and embrace the startup mindset again. So we have to, like, for instance, look at speed. We have to make up our minds a lot faster. In the past, when our staff come up to us and give us an idea, we can afford to wait 2 to 3 months, think about it, have meetings and stuff like that. Now, we actually need to have a faster turnaround. We need to use data. If we don't have so much time to decide, we may have to have a more systematic approach. And so that's why we want to look at data to see where the trends are headed, and that will help you to make some sort of advised, informed decisions faster. And of course, you also want to think about how your consumers are consuming your product. a lot of F&Bs have been investing a lot of time on, you know, low touch ways of dishing out their services. Today, I received another report about how to tapao your products, your F&B items from the shops, and how you have to adjust and bring your own utensils, and, you know, make sure that there is no direct contact with your delivery person when you receive the food and stuff like that. All these low touch payments and stuff are not a nice to have, it's a you must have now, all right? And then you can no longer think about 5 to 8 weeks thinking and deciding. Remember, now your turnaround is 2 to 3 days. You see an idea, cut the bureaucracy, implement, monitor. Everything has become a reset and a hypothesis that you need to test and try. Then about thinking about how, you know, you change your core, right? How does your team work? How will your team work in the future? You know, automation. Have you actually leveraged automation to help your team work faster and more efficiently? Especially when a lot of us are still needing to observe social distancing and all that. So does that mean that we work less? Well, as I was saying earlier, we actually work more because we accelerate in terms of using digital technology, right? And all the collaboration tools are now working in full force. And of course, this means that you need to stay in touch with your team more. And then you need to, again, look at your customer playbook. Look at your micro segmentations. You need to work with your team on the floor to understand who might be your customer and where the opportunities might be. And then the other thing is to work as a team in terms of building new ecosystems. Your neighbors that maybe in the past we never talked to, you might actually have to work with them too, because there might be opportunities either in terms of supply chains or in terms of delivery systems. If you work together, you can collaborate a lot faster. And finally, of course, it's to be ready to adapt. What I love to say is in the past, we used to worry about our competition, everything cannot. But today, it feels like people have become more open, and it seems like a lot of things that were cannot in the past have become a can, why not, all right? So from a strategy perspective, what I wanted to share was that there are things that we can do as franchisors. So in terms of royalties, one thing is, of course, if you can afford to reduce the royalty payment or defer payments and stuff, that's good. But as I said earlier, that is not the main objective, because that only leads us to a lose-lose environment. What we want to do is to come up with more innovative ideas, rethink our business, even decide how we market our products. But the important thing is, in terms of royalties, you also need to still be a franchisor. Ultimately, you're still a franchisor, and you're a franchisor to, I guess, build a sustainable business, right? So if you're not doing that, then, you know, we might as well just forget about being a franchisor. So somewhere along the line, your royalties still need to come into play. But we should look bigger. We should look at the bigger picture and look at how we can manage to still help them to bring in revenue, so that there's a role for us to play in terms of control and compliance. Supply chain, a lot of supply chains have become disrupted. So we also talk about how you control your secret recipes, how you control your know-how and how it's disseminated, and then how you implement those marketing strategies, how you reduce the cycles, and how you, more importantly, communicate that with your franchisees. Then quality control, because now restricted movement. In Malaysia, locally, perhaps you're still able to check on supply and control quality. But a lot of Malaysian franchisors are already international players. So how do you manage your training? How overseas, how do you control the quality that is being offered to the end consumers? Now, those are all things that are very, very real, even in the times of pandemic, right? You can be more flexible, but you still need to figure out how you're going to control that, because your brand has to survive this pandemic and what's going to emerge on the other side. Maybe there'll be more innovation, That's the good side, but there could be a lot of disruption to what you actually hold dear as a brand. And then number 3 is innovation. How do you leverage technology to automate and digitize your business? How can you use data to develop new strategies? And then now, a lot of business in the past didn't care about business continuity planning, but now it's a reality, right? People who didn't think about it in the past really had to rush to make things work. But if you can now identify precautionary controls so that you can reduce the effects of the system disruptions, you should put that in place and keep it in place. Then you need to also design contingency strategies to ensure that your system will recover faster. So from a franchise management perspective, the focus is on digital efforts to include the entire franchise organization. So in Singapore, we are focusing a lot on the remote office. So at Astream, we use this thing called the virtual business management operation workplace. So all our team and franchisors work from a business platform that allows them to all be talking about the same thing at the same time in the same place. All right. So from a process and workflow perspective, a lot of people have changed their workflow to cope with the pandemic. So there's been a lot of new workflows in place. So one of the important things will be disseminating. How do you disseminate these new processes so that all your franchisees can benefit from it? The other thing is how you implement and how do you monitor these new workflows. Whilst we can use online communication, we need also to have things in place to actually make sure that our franchisees are actually using these new implementation and workflows so that they can benefit from your learnings. So for instance, using technology, you're able to disseminate it very quickly, you can control, and you can update your processes with them digitally quickly. Then from a workflow perspective, you can now develop end-to-end automated workflows leveraging technology. Now, it sounds very, very complicated, but there are a lot of technology tools out there that are already set up so that you can use them for one part of your franchise management. And if they are not integrated, you can actually look for tools that have open APIs where you can then pull in data onto one central management platform. From a franchise management perspective, we also care about the quality control. So that's the other thing we're talking about in terms of training. How do you implement it? How will you regulate it? How will your audits be conducted and assessed? And if you are not able to travel or your team cannot travel as freely as in the past, locally and now especially internationally, how are you going to keep engaging your franchisees? So virtual training has become a real thing. This is actually, the first 3 pictures are my team. The last picture are my Vietnamese franchisors. So we are actually helping our franchisors develop an online training program so that they can then develop their virtual training with their franchisees, right? So what we call guided online consulting. And all these workflows are now digitized so that franchisors can upload their own training, implement their training processes, evaluate, and then keep track of progress for their franchisees. So I think that that is one of the things that, one of the examples about how the world has become smaller whilst bigger at the same time. Because today, Astream can consult in Malaysia, in Vietnam, in China, using our virtual training tool. And we help our clients to set up these tools virtually without actually ever seeing them in person. So the last thing we wanted to share is that the franchisor-franchisee relationship, even though you cannot see them, it is still the paramount cornerstone of what will make you succeed and survive together. And that will be the virtual management of your franchise needs to translate to, like in the past, if you're managing an international franchisee, you may not see them very often because you have to travel to see them, right? But interestingly, with COVID-19 happening to us, we are now finding ourselves having more meetings with our team. And technically, you should be having more meetings with your franchisees even though if the meetings are a little bit shorter, you can actually engage them a lot more. And by engaging them a lot more, your relationship will improve over time. And then also with your franchisor and franchisee, we encourage more collaboration, more exchange of ideas, and then you can have more data-driven meetings as well. And finally, what I wanted to say was that, you need to show your franchisees you care about them and what you're doing to protect the brand. Because even though how you do things may change, but your principal value of what your brand means should very much stay the same, right? And finally, we want to talk about the communicate more, not less, okay? So summary, the post-MCO success is number one, assess your COVID-19 rapid action bucket. So a lot of things have changed. You want to record down what was changed temporarily, what was changed permanently, and what was changed, what are the changes you want to keep and what you want to document. Don't change just because you saw something happen or your sales fell temporarily. You want to assess whether these changes are temporary or permanent. Once you have assessed that, then take action. Now you want to focus more on your customer experience. And again, I kept talking about the micro segmentation. So instead of serving everybody, you might need to figure out who you really serve, who is your customer, and really understand what value you bring to the customer experience. All right? Then change the way you work with your teams and your franchisees as well, which brings back to the meet more, not less, even though it's at a safe distance or online. You need to reinvent your work processes. You need to communicate. Use technology to even up your game and reskill your workforce and franchisees. Remember, this is a time where there's a lot of changes, but it's also a place where everything got reset. And for those who have been doing very well, it's a time where you have to reset also, realize it's reset for everyone. Make sure that you actually see how all the changes affect your business, because what got you there in the past may not get you there in the future. And for those who are floundering possibly before COVID-19, it's also a reset. So it's a time for you to up your game, because you have a real chance to accelerate your growth, because other people may have been slowed down in the process. All right. Finally, be adaptable, be flexible, listen to the ground, communicate, be imaginative, and reimagine the future with your lead data. Don't depend on lag data as you have always been doing. And before I wrap up, I just wanted to say, together with your franchisees, you can build a better and even stronger future for your brands. So for all of you who are franchisors, go forth and grow in safety and prosperity. I have a handout that I've put together for you guys. If you want, please message me if you wanted that wrap up. But thank you again, MFA and the ministry, for including a stream in this session. Very, very honored to be with you. All the best.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Sianaidu, for highlighting us on franchise crisis and the importance of digitalization as part of the crisis management, and for sharing some key messages for the way forward. So we are on time, and our second speaker, Madam Wong Jini, Madam Wong Jini. So I would like to give a brief introduction. Madam Wong Jini is a founding partner of the intellectual property and technology firm. She is a registered patent agent, registered trademark agent, and registered industrial agent in Malaysia. She is the past president of the Licensing Executive Society Malaysia, past chair of the Bar Council IP Committee, former head of IPR Committee of the EU Malaysia Chamber of Commerce, and past executive committee member of the Malaysian Franchise Association. Jini is one of the panelists appointed by Kuala Lumpur Regional Centre for Arbitration and Asia Domain Name Dispute Resolution Center, and a certified mediator on the panel of the Malaysian Mediation Center. Jeannie is also one of the IP valuers trained by the MyIPO and certified by World Trade Institute. So without any further ado, I would like to give a very warm welcome to Madam Wong Jeannie on her topic, Managing Legal Issues. All yours, Wong Jeannie.
Right. Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to thank MFA and the Ministry for inviting me to speak this morning on the first webinar conducted by MFA. I hope everyone is keeping well and safe during this challenging and uncertain time. My topic today is on managing legal issues during and post recovery MCO. And today is the first day of the RMCO. So this is briefly the agenda of the topics that I will talk in my session. The impact and what is to be expected. So expect the unexpected, and I think we heard a lot of that from the previous speaker who gave an excellent background. And this is also to set the stage and the background for the common issues, legal issues that arose or were raised by whether the franchisors or franchisees during this difficult period. And then I'll share some of the legal issues as well as some of the legislation and what are some alternative options to consider, lessons learned moving forward, and some key takeaways. I think a picture paints 1,000 words. These were some of the effect of COVID-19 pandemic during the lockdown period. The malls were empty, the roads were desolate with no cars, the airports were eerily empty as well. And then people donning face masks and have to exercise social distancing measures during that period. So the impact of COVID-19 pandemic is of an unprecedented scale, to say the least. So everyone, or whether franchisors, franchisees, we all have to navigate the uncharted water. So everything has changed and nothing is certain. It is a new normal. We learn a lot of new words, social distancing, lockdowns, self-isolation, terms like work from home, and even blur's day, like what Sian Naidu was saying, that you have lost track of the time, whether it's day or night or weekday or weekend. So we are all in the survival mode, especially during the MCO period. So what is to be expected? Actually, COVID-19 has caused havoc in businesses around the world, whether you're a large brand or a small franchisee or small franchise brand. So the franchise industry is certainly not spared. And this is unprecedented because there are multiple countries in the world in lockdown at the same time. Consumers are staying home. Behaviors have changed, as we've heard. Economies in free fall, and we also heard from earlier, whether is it V shape, Nike shoes shape, or Z shape, or L shape, whatever shape that may be. Franchisors and franchisees are in the same boat. So they have to learn to support each other in new ways. So there has been significant impact and disruption on sales, on revenues, on performance, on store opening, supply chain, and the entire franchise network. So we have also seen the birth of new ways of doing things. So franchisors are expected to show leadership to the franchisees and to their own team members. Franchisees are also expected to show leadership to their employees as to how to respond, recover, and normalize business. So there is a need to establish a culture of resilience and agility. So the question that sometimes businesses would have to consider is it time to adopt a more humane approach where you would share the pain, you would adopt a collaborative spirit, you would show empathy, compassion, and working together to fight the common enemy, right? So ultimately, everyone is hoping for revenge spending, whether revenge eating or shopping, to normalize the economy. Hopefully the economy will be revived. So while the franchise players so far we have seen would try on collaborative solutions, but from a lawyer's perspective and also from the questions that we have received, we also need to be realistic and be prepared for the worst, because there is a possibility that having tried everything, one of the parties may want to exit the relationship, right? So what are the commonly raised issues? These are some of the common questions that we have received over this past 3 months, whether from franchisors or franchisees or people in the franchise industry. So the main thing is there is an inability for them to meet the unit opening or development deadlines. Normally, whether as a master franchisee or area developer, there would be a deadline to be met in terms of store opening. So because of the lockdown, there would be this challenge. And of course, there would be zero sales during a complete lockdown, depending on which sectors, or sharp decline in revenue, cash flow problems, making it challenging to operate. There would be additional expenses to be incurred by the franchisees for compliance with safety or SOPs issued by the government. For example, they have to spend more on sanitization, hygiene, social distancing measures, that they could not allow more customers to enter the shops at the same time, contact tracing application or requirements. So there will be also disruptions to the supply chain, resulting in difficulty in getting ingredients or products for the sale. Some of the franchisees may also encounter issues with employees' retrenchment and salary cuts. They're also seeking to defer royalty payment, known as royalty holiday. We have also heard about some franchisors offering a reduction or a deferment. They have challenges in complying with various documents or agreements, like their franchise agreement, their supply agreements, tenancy agreements. In addition, because of the nature of the MCO, there are regulations to be followed, there are SOPs, there are guidelines. So basically, they're quite lost in application of these applicable laws. All this have resulted in anxiety, depression, and of course, some are planning to give up. They're overwhelmed, essentially. And questions have been raised as to how to terminate the franchise relationship. So these are some of the legal issues that I've compiled. One, of course, is compliance, which I've talked about earlier. This compliance with various laws, including the regulations under the relevant MCO. Now we are into the recovery MCO, and you have the Franchise Act and PDPA. I'll talk a little bit more about personal data protection. And then the franchise agreement, questions about force majeure clause has come out, question about termination before the due date, before the expiry, before the, whether they have a right to terminate. What happens if they are unable to fulfill certain obligations, and would they be able to invoke their business interruption or insurance premium policy? So these are some of the issues that have been raised. And of course, business continuity plans have come into play. BCP usually outlines how a business will continue to operate during and after an unplanned disruption, such as a disaster or a crisis like a COVID-19. It sets out procedures and guidelines to follow, from the standard business processes to human resource issues, to supply chain, to every aspect of the business that may be affected. And also the system, the concept, the franchise concept. So during this period, we've also heard that there may be a need to adapt. So with the adaptation, with the revision to cater for, let's say, digitization, or online presence. So there is a need to make sure that this updated system would be properly incorporated into the SOP, and it has to be notified or communicated to the franchisees. There will be training and support to be conducted. In fact, during this period, many franchisors may have to retrain, retool, reskills their franchisees and their own team to provide support. And the support may not only be in terms of physical support, but it could be emotional support, because this is the time when a lot of franchisees will be reaching out to the franchisor for emotional support as well. Having said that, you need to update the SOPs, you need to update your training manuals, and then you need to make sure that they have to form part of the franchise documents or disclosure documents, as well as franchise agreement. So this, during the MCO, our MCO, recovery MCO, we have a new regulation that came into force today, and it will last until 31st of August 2020. So it's important to be aware of this regulations and what are the prohibited activities. So I've shared with you here on my screen a schedule of prohibited activity. So one important point to note is, even if you are allowed to open, let's say you're in retail clothing, retail of clothing, one of the prohibited activity is you cannot allow the fitting of clothing, right? Using fitting rooms in your store. You cannot allow trying on accessories in the store. So these are some of the issues that you need to be mindful of. So apart from the regulations on the RMCO, you may want to consider the few legislation that may be relevant for your franchise practice. One, of course, is the Franchise Act. It's the main legislation that governs the parties, the franchise industry. It is important to note that there is this provision in Section 29 that says that the franchisor and franchisee shall act in an honest and lawful manner and shall endeavor to pursue the best practice of the time and place. I think it's very relevant now. Both parties have to act in an honest and lawful manner and pursue the best practice, basically act in good faith, in each other's interests. Of course, the franchisor and franchisee should also avoid adopting certain conduct, for example, conduct that is unnecessary, unreasonable in relation to the risk to be incurred by one party, conduct that is not reasonably necessary for the protection of the legitimate business interests. So this is a broad stroke of the conduct of parties that is stipulated in the Franchise Act. And another provision that is relevant for the franchise industry to note is, of course, termination. As I said earlier, whilst we are all in this collaborative spirit, finding ways to and solutions, there may be situations where there is a need to consider termination. So the franchisor and franchisee must be aware that they are not able to terminate before expiration, except for good cause. And this would usually be incorporated into the franchise agreement. Otherwise, it would not have been approved by the ministry. So it's also important to determine and check the agreement to see whether the force majeure event, which I will talk about at a later stage, is one of the good causes that you can actually terminate the agreement. And we have heard that there are many franchisors who are adopting a very humane, compassionate approach, and they are also providing discounts or waiver or deferment on certain payments. When doing that, it is important for the franchisors to be mindful of Section 20 of the Franchise Act, which is a prohibition against discrimination of franchisees. It is an offense if the franchisor to discriminate against franchisees in terms of the franchise fees, royalty, goods, services, equipment, as well as advertising fees. So these are some of the issues that the franchisee should look at, franchisor should look at, and to examine whether are they able to say that there are some exceptions under the provision to allow a higher discount or higher waiver for certain franchisees as compared to others. Right? So it is important to be mindful of that provision. And during this stage, as you know, for all of us consumers who go to most business premises, we are required to provide our data, our personal data for contact tracing purposes, right? So there has been an advisory issued by the Personal Data Protection Department, PDPA, PDPD, under the Personal Data Protection Act 2010. And the collection must still be based on the principles. There are various principles of PDPA, and it cannot be excessive. Yeah, and under the advisory, it caters for 3 types of information to be collected: the name of the visitor or the customer, the phone number, as well as the date and time of arrival at the premises. So the businesses have the option of obtaining or recording this information digitally or manually. As you can see, some businesses have actually created apps with QR code to enable the consumers to key in their data, right? And what is important is the personal data that is provided for this purpose can only be used for contact tracing purposes. So the businesses should not use this data to send out marketing materials or for other purposes. This is expressly provided under the advisory. And the advisory also provides that the personal data has to be stored for a period of 6 months after the cessation date of the MCO or RMCO. At the moment, it may be further extended. At the moment, it's up to 31st August, but it may be further extended. So you need to make sure that the personal data should be kept for that period. And after that, you have to destroy. You have to have a mechanism to destroy or delete the personal data. And there is a huge fine, a maximum fine of up to 300,000 and or 2 years imprisonment for this violation. So there has been some in the advisory. The PDPD has shared some clear data notices, the example of what can be stated or the notices to be displayed at the business premises. So they provided sample in Bahasa Malaysia as well as in English, where you should display the notices at conspicuous areas within the premises so that they are visible to the visitors as well as the customers. Yeah, so these are just suggested formats. You can revise the format. In addition to this, there are, for those entities or businesses have decided to go online, they need to be aware that there's this Consumer Protection Electronic Trade Transactions Regulation under the Consumer Protection Act 1999. So apart from the Trade Descriptions Act 2011, Consumer Protection Act 1999, so there's this specific regulation that has been enforced since 1st July. Whether you're operating through your own website or you are operating through an online marketplace like Lazada, Shopee. So there's certain information that should be disclosed. So this information will include the name of the person, the business or the company, the registration number, email, telephone, and the address, the descriptions of the characteristics of the goods and services, the full price of the products or the services, including, if assuming it's products, how much do you charge for transport, the tax and other costs to be incurred. What is the payment method? Is it online banking or credit card? What are the terms and conditions, as well as the estimated delivery time? So this is expressly provided under this regulation. For some franchisors, they are concerned that, basically their agreements have not been signed, and how do they actually sign the agreements during the lockdown period, or since they cannot actually meet with their franchisees physically, whether locally or even overseas. So we do provide for, we have an Electronic Commerce Act 2006, where agreements actually can be formed electronically, and agreements can also be signed electronically, and this agreement can be enforceable, and they are valid, and they are legally binding, right? And even these kind of agreements where they are signed, they can be stamped online, so you don't need to be concerned about the physical documents. So moving on to force majeure clause. I think this is one of the common questions that was raised during this period, because a lot of parties are worried that they cannot meet the obligations, and they want to make sure that they can actually invoke the force majeure clause. COVID-19 or MCO or RMCO or CMCO itself will not automatically be considered a force majeure event. So whether it is a force majeure event will have to depend on the wording and scope of the clause in the franchise agreement, and whether the agreement will contain such clause. And I must say, in most franchise agreement, there would be, even though it's normally towards the end of the agreement, where most parties do not focus on the agreement, the clause, right? With courtesy of COVID-19, now force majeure clause is playing a center stage, right? It has increased importance during this period. So the first point is you need to look at your franchise agreement, whether it includes a force majeure provision, and if it does, to see whether it expressly referred to, of course not COVID-19 unless you can foresee, but whether it includes a pandemic or epidemic, right? And normally a lot of provisions that would cover the types of events such as acts of God, war, terrorism, natural disaster. They may not say pandemic, but they refer to epidemic or even government restrictions. So the legal effect would ultimately depend on the specific wording of the agreement. And depending on the wording, the clause may allow either the franchisee or the franchisor to terminate the agreement if the force majeure event continues beyond a specific time frame, or the franchisee may be excused from performing the agreement in part or in whole, depending on the clause, or it may also allow for the suspension or the extension of the time frame, right? So to help you, I've actually come up with a very brief step-by-step guide. If you want to look at the force majeure clause, so step one, to look at your franchise agreement to see whether it contains that provision. If yes, then you go to your subsequent step to examine whether it has specific references to pandemics, epidemics, or similar events. If not, maybe it makes references to other events beyond the reasonable control of the party. And then it is also important for the party who intends to invoke this provision to serve a notice in accordance with the terms. And when you serve the notice, you need to make sure that you comply with the notice provision in the franchise agreement. So in the franchise agreement, there normally would be a notice provision where you have to send it to a specific person at a specific address. So it's important for you to comply with that provision. And then you need to outline what would you like, whether to be excused by from performing for certain obligation, whether, which provision, or is it to suspend, or is it to extend, to seek for extension of time, or is it to terminate the agreement? So you need to be clear on what is your intention. And if you want to rely on this provision, you must prove that the occurrence, the lockdown, and such an event has prevented you, has hindered you, or has delayed the performance of the agreement. Then you also need to prove that this event is actually circumstances beyond your control, and you have actually taken steps to actually mitigate such consequence or event. So this is it's not one size fit all, but at the end of the day, it's important to actually look at the franchise agreement, the terms of the franchise agreement. So if you don't have a force majeure clause, so is it possible to consider frustration, right? So this, before I go into that, this is a sample clause. If you want to revise, you may want to look at the sample clause from the International Chamber of Commerce. That has been, you can actually go into their website to look at how they drafted the force majeure clause. Then we look at the doctrine of frustration. In Malaysia, we do have that doctrine of frustration under our Contracts Act, right? And it is under Section 57.2. It's a rather technical, but if you can refer to that, it happens when if it's a contract to do an act, which after the contract has been made, so there must be a contract made, it becomes impossible by reason of some event which the promisor could not prevent. It's unlawful, becomes void when the act becomes impossible or unlawful to perform, right? So in order to rely on this provision, the party must fulfill 3 requirements. First, the event, i.e. the COVID-19, the lockdown, whether it's during the MCO, CMCO or MCO, it must be one where no provision has been provided in the agreement. So if there's a force majeure clause, you can't rely on this provision, right? So you go back to your force majeure clause. But if there's no provision provided in the agreement, then the next stage is you cannot be responsible for this event. Of course, we are not responsible for COVID, we are not responsible for MCO, right? So a self-induced event cannot be relied on. Then the third element is it must be such that the event has rendered the performance of the agreement radically different from the originally undertaken, that the court must find it unjust to enforce the original obligation. So the point is not all agreements will be frustrated merely because it has become difficult to perform. In fact, it is not an easy provision to invoke. There's a case in Hong Kong where during the SARS period, where one of the tenants tried to invoke a similar provision, similar doctrine of frustration by claiming that he was unable to perform his part during SARS period because he cannot stay in his premises for a period of 10 days. And the court refused to allow that because the tenancy agreement was for 2 years. So the court held that it was not sufficient. The period of 10 days cannot be said to have to cause it impossible to perform the agreement. So it's a very important point to note that this provision has very narrow application. It's not an easy provision to invoke. So normally people would actually fall back to force majeure. You will only come to this if there's no force majeure. So the question is whether COVID-19, whether the MCO made it impossible for the parties to perform, right? So ultimately it depends on the terms of the agreement again and the facts of the case, right? So the party must prove that the event has rendered the agreement impossible, right? So an agreement, just to re-emphasize, an agreement does not become frustrated just because it has become difficult or expensive to perform. So these are some of the alternative options, and some of the options that are outlined here have some overlap with what CN Naidu has indicated earlier. I think during this period, it's very important to work together. You may want to consider waiving certain payment. Again, as CN Naidu has rightly pointed out, it's very important for both parties to understand that it's a long-term relationship. Yeah, franchisors and franchisees both have mutual interest to ensure each party's survival and to protect the respective businesses. So there's no one size that fits all. It's important for both parties to try to appreciate each other's predicaments and perspective. So franchisors may have a number of franchisees operating franchises around the world. So if the franchisee feels that they are badly affected, so you can imagine from the perspective of the franchisor, it can be multiplied by a few fold, yeah? And also the franchisee, how a franchisee experience this will also depend on the stage, right? A veteran franchisee who has many years of experience may face a different issue from that of a new franchisee. So the support that is given or shown by the franchisor would have to address according to the needs of each franchisee. So while parties can actually mutually agree to suspend certain terms for a limited period of time, it can be agreeing to royalty holiday, or reduction, or even deferment, and then paying back when the times, better times, like the sales have increased, or to suspend the minimum order. In some franchise agreement, there will be a requirement for minimum order of products. It is very hard for franchisee to meet that minimum requirement during this challenging time. And during this period, the franchisor will provide enhanced support, guidance without additional fees usually. And also to extend the credit term, let's say for a normal period of 30 days to even 90 days. So it is important to find solutions together, and we heard about some of the talking points, the suggestions provided earlier by the earlier speaker. You may want to allow some online sale, from dining in to allow takeouts, home delivery, to allow collaboration with third parties such as GrabFood, Foodpanda, to allow digital advertisement. Of course, all is subject to quality control, subject to ensuring that the brand image, the brand integrity will not be affected. Customer updates, survey, the franchisor may actually come up with apps for consumer registration, contact tracing purposes. And during this period, the franchisor may even allow for procurement or sourcing from third-party suppliers due to disruption to their usual suppliers. And they may assist franchisees to negotiate with landlords or their suppliers for a reduced rate. And it is also important to adapt the policies and procedures, formulating the SOPs, customizing them, prioritizing and focusing on safety of customers and staff, developing FAQs on commonly raised questions. That will save a lot of time, because if you realize most of the questions posed by franchisees are rather standard, after a while you kind of like get some of the frequently asked. So it will be a good idea to compile them. And also nowadays, with a lot of government programs, government assistance, you may actually compile the relevant resources and provide them with the links, the information, the relevant forms to assist them in getting the subsidies or the programs. It is important to have ongoing engagement and communication. I think a lot of franchisors feel that during this time, they communicate even more frequently than usual, because it is time to talk to their franchisees, to motivate them, to send the right message that we are all in this together. And then if we come up, we will actually be stronger and more resilient. And it's important to focus on long-term, interdependent support. So what are the lessons learned and way forward? So it's important to review and update the franchise agreement, especially for those franchise agreements that do not have detailed force majeure clause. It may be important to update them. And with all the changes made to the system, to the operating procedures, it's important to update the manuals as well, to consider even business interruption insurance requirement as one of the policies to be purchased. But having said that, before you actually amend and adopt the changes in the documents, you have to be mindful that Section 11 of the Franchise Act that any amendments have to be made with approvals, especially material changes. And there's no definition of what is deemed to be material change. So on the safe side, it's important to get approval of the registrar. It is also important to review and revise your existing privacy notices, because during this time, a lot of companies, a lot of businesses realize that they need to communicate with their customers more often than not. And sometimes they may not actually have the consent, right? Or their privacy notices are not there or not sufficient. So they need to actually update this and be mindful of the advisory that I shared earlier, that you cannot use the information provided for contact tracing for your marketing purposes. And it's also important to review your IP portfolios. If you notice during this time, you may expand your services, you may expand your goods to cover some of the items that are not originally covered by your trademark registration. For example, your trademark registration may only be for restaurant services. You may now want to cover for home delivery, takeout, as well as online retail, advertisement. And if you sell PPE products right now, for example, face masks, if you're in clothing business, but you may actually expand to sell clothing face masks, which is very trendy these days, you may want to update your IP portfolios, as well as your confidentiality, your SOPs, basically in terms of updating your system, right? As we heard earlier, it is important to engage and communicate with your franchisees regularly, and not to mention your customers. You may want to actually share your operating hours, because there may be an assumption that you may not open the full hours. So it's time to update the information on your website, whether you offer takeouts, home delivery only, or if you are in certain businesses, you may want to indicate that your visits are on appointment. For example, if you're a hair salon, maybe you only allow customers to come in on appointment basis only. And to manage expectation in terms of delivery time, it is also important to share your SOP on your hygiene and sanitization, because that may actually provide assurance to your consumers or your customers, may actually increase sales or encourage them to visit your store. I think it's important for the franchisors to leverage on the government support programs. This is the time you may look at the wage subsidy and to help your franchisees to leverage on these programs as well. And if you allow your franchisees to purchase from new suppliers, it is important to ensure that the suppliers provide high quality products. So you need to adopt safeguards against unscrupulous suppliers who are taking advantage and opportunity to supply low quality or sometimes even counterfeit products. It is important to retrain your own team apart from those of the franchisees. And I think now more than ever, it is important to lean in on your franchise network, your other franchisor, sharing of experience, leaning in on trade association like MFA to seek guidance and support. So moving forward, and we have also heard that the Malaysian government is contemplating, in fact, is preparing a bill for temporary measure like that, the one adopted in Singapore. So I think it is a good law to have, because it would provide some measures, and perhaps the Singapore model can be actually considered in drafting the provision. So I believe MFA would have been consulted on this provision as well. So my last slide is on some takeaways. Just to recap some of the points that I've shared earlier, the main thing is to review your franchise agreement and manuals for gap analysis. What are the shortcomings? What are the issues, or what are the items that you need to update? It is important to review your IP portfolios to expand your trademark filing, to expand your classes of goods or services. And record keeping. So if you have sent out notices to your franchisees, you need to make sure that they are kept properly, because that will be required if you need to, if assuming that your franchisee later goes to court or take action against you, or if there's a dispute. So it's important to record, to retain all this information or communication. It is also important to notify, because even if you have amended your documents, you need to make sure that you notify or get information to be sent to your franchisees. And if you provide any enhanced support or training to your franchisees, you need to update your SOPs. And the constant engagement, communication, and conversation with stakeholders, including the Ministry of Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs, to share with them what are the common issues that the franchisors as well as franchisees encounter during this period. So perhaps they can actually take into account and provide some guidance on how they interpret certain provisions of the Franchise Act, because the enforcement of the Franchise Act will actually be undertaken by the ministry. So it may be a good time for them to actually share how they're going to deal with certain violations, so to speak. Yeah, and together, I think it's important for the parties to find solution, because it is a long-term relationship. It's not one-off. I think this is important for both parties, both the franchisors and the franchisees, to bear in mind that, you know, it's not like you just want to get out of this relationship during the hard time. It's for the good and the bad times. Yeah. So this would be my takeaway. And last but not least, thank you so much for your time. And I think I've exceeded the time a little bit, but I got some consent from Derek, because he said that I could use some of his time. So thank you very much for your attention.
Can't hear you, Prof.
I mute. Oh, okay. Hello? Okay, I repeat again. Hello, Derek. Our third, thank you. Derek, can you hear me, Derek?
Yes, now can.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, Madam Wong Jini, for sharing with us a very rich information on managing legal issues and also step-by-step legal aspect. So our next presenter is Mr. Derek Yeo. Derek Yeo is a director for the Revenue Valleys Neighborhood, which houses local and international food and beverages brands such as the Manhattan Fish Market and New York Steak Shacks and the new local brand Dapurlah. He has been active in the area of franchise business development for the group for the past 10 years, and he is also the vice chairman of Malaysia Franchise Association. He has been a frequent contributor to the Malaysia franchise industry for the training and seminar provided by MFA. He also the chairman of the Malaysia Franchise Malaysia Exhibition, FIM, Derek also has been appointed as the chairman of the Nexus Productivity of Retail and Food Beverages under Malaysia Productivity Board. So today, Derek will be sharing with us another important topic, restructuring your new training and support. So over to you, Derek.
Hey, thank you, Prof. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, just let me share something. Okay, good morning, everyone. I believe just now the two earlier speaker, Ms. Yen and also Ms. Wong, has actually given us a very very deep insight on the happening about recent COVID-19 issues. And I believe all of us here, 100 over people in this seminar, webinar, experience almost most of the pointers that has been pointed out. So probably what I will take some time to share today is actually probably to a lot of us in business, training probably is the least important things that we thought all this while. Maybe some of us have thought differently, but again, training is actually very important, especially during economic downturn like this or COVID-19, which is unexpected. So this is something that we have been, like what Sian said, during this COVID when we have to work from home, in fact, we spend more time working via Zoom, via technology. Yeah? So it is really something new normal for every one of us. And especially in F&B or retail, we face more challenges where we are actually categorized as the essential services for F&B, but there are so many new things that we have to learn or to adjust during this COVID-19 period. So in terms of support, the ongoing support is still ongoing, especially for our overseas partners or franchisee. We have currently 12 countries outside Malaysia. So every country is facing different sets of challenges and issues. They are all being locked down as well. Some has been out of it, some has still being locked down, no dining allowed, things like that in F&B. So we are still constantly, like what Sian and Ms. Wong mentioned, communication is important. We have been communicating with all the franchisees, different parts of the world, even Malaysia, on different sets of issues and supports that we have given them. Well, some of the support is probably like the temporary relief on the royalties, and also some of the local franchisee, we also help them in terms of rental negotiation with the landlords, whether it's successful or not, but then we show our concern, show our presence as a brand owner together with them to talk to some of landlords. So in terms of restructuring training, I mean, training has been there for a franchise system to work. Training of SOP or standard operating procedure is very important. So every one of us here probably have a set of SOP has been crafted or has been in use for all this while. So, but I believe during this period of time, there are new things happening that we have not encountered before. So what we have been doing as a group in terms of my groups or some of the franchisers group that we have been constantly in communicating with, we have to actually follow some of these directions and also suggestions from the ministry, especially on social distancing. So to set up a social distancing measures is very simple. I mean, we will have to draft out the content and whatnot, but the execution part where the training comes in place is something that we need to work on, whereby the time there's a lot of constraints or restrictions for us to move around. So we will have to actually use a lot of technology to actually send out the information, ensure we monitor the execution well. And these are some of the areas that we've been doing all this while. We have to set the new service tab, new way of payment, new ways of delivering food, and so on. So this is one of the training restructuring that we did. Comparing to previously, we are more focusing on services and product knowledge, but now this comes in one of the critical area that we want to ensure our clients or our guests, customers are at a comfortable and safe area to dine in or even to order or buy food from us. Yeah, it may not be very relevant to non-F&B players, but I'm sure every set of SOP created by the ministry or suggested by the ministry will have this safe distancing or safety measures, which is quite similar. Yeah. So in terms of F&B, we we can do all this execution, as I said just now, marking the table, doing a space of 1 meter apart, and also doing the floor marking is something that we can do quite easily. But then the training part is something that we need to ensure all our staff or employees understand what is the purpose of this social distancing. How do they react in terms of customers reacting to differently to our measures? And of course, sometimes we also encourage experienced customers to not cooperate, and then that's how we actually restructure our training, replan our training on how do we actually manage or this kind of customers that we need to actually educate and to advise them. Okay, so questions like, oh, if my customers is having a fever, can I allow them to come in if they insist? Things like that. We will have a lot of FAQ question and answers for them to actually role play using Zoom or even Skype meeting with them, so they will be able to actually understand the consequences of doing such measures. So during this COVID-19, in terms of restructuring training, we have a lot of we put in a lot of new measures or initiatives in place. For example, everybody is on delivery platform to deliver the food to our guests. So from having just the major food delivery, we actually embark on different smaller platforms. But then these are part and parcel of the current situations until now. But currently, because we have the dine segment coming back, so we are still holding on to the delivery segment, because we know and we don't know, we may not know that what is a coming trend, whether people will still be comfortable coming out to dine in, and especially the social distancing measures actually cut down half or more than half of our seating capacity in the restaurants. So delivery, takeaway, drive-through, or phone ordering is our new segment or new sales channels that we are doing on digital platform. And all these needed trainings, where most of our waiter, waitress, or managers, or even managers in the restaurants level are not so IT expert or not so well versed in IT in terms of handling this kind of digital platform. So a lot of changes in terms of providing simple, basic IT knowledge to them is essential at the moment, currently ongoing. So the fortunate thing is that we have actually planned our digitalization process since last year, even before COVID. So what happened now is actually we are just speeding up the process to actually use it during this period of time for COVID. So besides that, due to the restrictions of the COVID-19 measures, we also have actually restructured or re-engineered some of our products offering or menu offerings, where we actually cater for a more fast cooking method, so that the food can be delivered faster, can be delivered out faster to the customers, to consumers. At the same time, we are also offering more affordable meals during these platforms, and thus we need to have more training, but we can't do it physically. We are doing video training, virtual training, to actually send through the messages on how the steps or SOPs to cook certain dishes. This will actually encourage people to buy more frequently from us, because everyone is fighting on the delivery platform now. Yeah. So in terms of digitalization training, as I mentioned just now, we are also going into mobile ordering, while we call it actually bring your own device ordering. And we actually encourage people, customers who dine in or come to our space or restaurants now, to actually use their own mobile setup to order, to scan our QR code and then do ordering. Yeah. So we are actually encouraging this so that we are having a contactless kind of payment method. And at the same time, while we exploring this, there are also features in this platform that actually allows AI intelligence, artificial intelligence, to actually capture the customers' historical data or likings when they come frequently next time, so that they will actually be prompted to the dishes that they actually more favor. So this is something that we are actually experiencing now, and thus the training and also the structured training previously on the physical setups now become very digital, and thus we need to actually put in more effort to actually train our staff into getting used to the digital world. Okay, so there are also other trainings, restructuring model that we are trying to do. At the moment, looking at the new future, there will be a lot of changes in terms of customers' behavior. So this is very important measures that most of us in F&B players are doing now, exploring new technologies into coping with the new normal that we are having. So these are the e-training that we've done all the while during COVID, and contactless payment that I mentioned just now. So there are so many platforms of e-payment in the market, right? You can have GrabPay, BoostPay, FavePay, and any of the QR code. So these are something has been there all the while, but then it is something that we are actually focusing more currently, so that all the outlets or all the restaurants or the industry players are more familiar with. So in terms of doing engagement with our guests or our customers at this period of time, we are also actually doing new engagement where we actually did some of the Zoom meeting like this, virtual meeting with our fans from Facebook, together with some of the local celebrity, to do Buka Puasa, virtual Buka Puasa that time. So in order for us to do this, there's a lot of new learnings for the marketing team as well. How to set up like today's session, how to ensure that everybody have a platform to ask questions and so on. It is something new that we are adjusting, and this is part and parcel of the restructuring of our training platform in the near future. It is very much dependent on digitalization, and not only we can use it in Malaysia, we can use it and communicate with all our partners in foreign countries. And we are also exploring new segment where we actually provide recipe. I'm sure there's a lot of brand out there also doing a DIY packet, a pack to send to customers during the period of COVID-19. So we are also doing this so that we can actually engage with the customers. And in order to do this, to craft an artwork or to send the recipe and also the ingredients to them, it is also something new for us to do. So there's a lot of new calibration needed to set up the learning and training portion. Yeah. So Manhattan Fish Market is actually a seafood. We are affordable seafood players and Western seafood players. So we understand that during these economic downturns, normally from previous economic recession, we see that franchising business model will be something that is a lot of people will be looking forward to. Why? Because of course now currently, I believe some of the people out there are underemployed or unemployed at the moment due to some situations that can't be avoided. But this is actually a good opportunity for a lot of franchisors to actually engage with this group of people by offering them a training platform to join the restaurants or to join the brand, and then they become part of your employee or employment before they can actually take up the role as a franchisee or your business partners. So I see this is as a potential avenue for us to actually look into the different structures of training, where actually this group of people may be groups of professionals or experts in different fields that has been out of job, or they are trying to look for a new opportunity to become their own boss. So we may be able to craft a different set of training to prepare them to take on a franchise business on their own. So at the moment, from what we heard last week from our Prime Minister about the new stimulus package to help the industry under the Penjana effort, I think I'm sure there's this reskilling and upskilling programs that I think we will also look into that to help us to fulfill this objective that we want to actually meet. Yeah, to get more franchisee to join us first, and then they subsequently will be able to take on the business after they familiarize after the training with them with the brand. So, however, we also understand that some of them may not be able to have the capability or capacity to have a bigger setup of capex to take on the investment. So we are also, during this period of time, we are actually doing a lot of restructuring on our business model, brand business model. From a full restaurant, probably we are actually going to launch our kiosk concept or even food truck concept or even virtual kitchen, so that the initial investment is affordable for a lot of aspiring entrepreneur out there to take on the business. So in order to do that, we are also restructuring our programs on how do we onboard this kind of groups of people that will be taking up the program from us. So currently what we have done is actually a virtual kitchen, or what they call is a ghost kitchen or cloud kitchen. Is actually a new brand. We have it as a new brand which called Dapola. Is actually a virtual kitchen that we actually house it inside a kitchen with the other brand. So but we don't have a physical store. So that's actually catered for more delivery segment. So in these times of pandemic or COVID-19, I think this will give our existing franchisee locally or overseas, and also to be franchisee a new investment area for them to look into the potential of this business, rather than they say they want to actually stop the business or selling the business and so on and so forth. Of course, we also have those issues from what have Sian and Wong mentioned just now, but we are actually communicating a lot with them, giving them a lot of options, a lot of suggestions to actually improve their business, so that they can actually hang on to the business and actually sustain the business in the longer run. Yeah. So besides the virtual kitchen, I mean the new segment, new sales channel, what I'm trying to say here is that actually every one of us now should be going back to basic. Yeah, back to basic, and we should do whatever we've done that before. We done that before, come across before, but something which is being out there now, we don't know what's going to happen. We should try everything and invest on a lot of current resources that you have to innovate and to create new things for the near future. So our latest opening was in our Myanmar countries, just 2 weeks before the COVID-19 in Malaysia being locked down. So we were quite the Myanmar side did not lock down so early. They were towards April. So it's also something that we have to actually help the franchisee there to actually hang on and do delivery for a while they have their new outlet opening up. So this is a coaching advice that we have been constantly giving them. So I think I need to hand over the session and to the next presenter. So for us, back to basic is something that we hold very dear to our heart now. Back to basic, so that we can actually get somewhere new and sustainable very soon. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Derek Yeo, thank you for your sharing. That was very important now for Manhattan to change the way you deliver products to your customer, the need for the digital platform due to the changing focus to delivery and also takeaways. Yeah. So running. So we are right on time. We just behind 7 minutes from the original, the schedule. So our last but not least panelist today is Mr. Khairul Azman, the International Director of Mary Brown. Let me give a short introduction to Mr. Khairul. Mr. Khairul Azman is the International Director for the Mary Brown's Neighborhood with total experience in F&B for 22 years. He joined Mary Brown in 2003 and started as Operations Department for 5 years, Head of Training Department for 5 years, Head of Franchise for 4 years. Currently, Mr. Khairul Azman is taking care of the operations, training, marketing, and business development in Africa, United Emirates, India, Indonesia, Brunei Darussalam, Singapore, Sri Lanka, and also Japan. So today, very important, he will be sharing with us on experience managing franchise during COVID-19. So over to you, Mr. Khairul.
All right, thank you, Prof. Thanks for MFA for having me, and hi to all the panelists and also to all the participants. Okay, bear with me. I know this is they put me the last part, the last session of this webinar, but however, actually, I don't have any slide to share with you because most of our things that I'm going to share is basically what are the I believe that most of the franchise owner or maybe the business owner over here, actually, you already did a very good in terms of how you handle this pandemic situation for the last 3 months. So the same goes to us. So when the pandemic COVID-19 hit the world as early as end of last year, December, all right? And during that time, actually, we are in Malaysia because we have our business partner right in China, where they have been hit first. So from that, actually, we already start to get prepared, okay? Because this thing is going to be hit Malaysia one day. The only thing we didn't know, basically, when is we're going to have a total lockdown, you know? So, but however, we need to be well prepared. So the most important actually, because we know that actually during this pandemic situation, it's something new. New generations, millennials generation, they have not, maybe they don't have an experience when the 1998, end of 1997, the crisis economy hit our countries, so badly. So it same goes to us. So what we do actually, we try to draw, the most important thing actually, we set up, we activate our crisis management team, in early February to get prepared and ready, because we know that actually, first of all, actually, a lot of people, a lot of franchisees, because we handle a lot of franchisees, not only in Malaysia, but also in overseas, they feel worried. Okay, they don't know what's going to happen, what am I supposed to do? Okay, I'm supposed to fire my staff and all these things. Even all our frontliners, like our crew, our staff, they also feel worried, they're emotional and unstable, all right? So we need to really handle all the situations. So we, with the team of members that we form for the crisis management team, this particular team, actually what we do is we try to draw a proper SOPs, okay, how that basically we can handle the situations in a proper manner, and how basically we can communicate this to all our franchisees, to our business associates, not only in Malaysia, but also in overseas. So speaking about this, we on the CMT team, actually, we try to get as much as possible on all the information related about the COVID-19, which is being announced by the federal government or even from the state government. We put it in a proper documentation, and we speak every day consistently with all our head of departments how to handle a different segment which is contributing to our business. All right. For example, that we come up with a proper SOPs. Okay, how that we can draw how we identify the essential and non-essential departments. Okay, to work from home, for example, and how basically we'll provide sufficient tools for them to work remotely, and how basically how we set up a KPI for them, and also how basically we do the follow-up and to make sure that everything still move on. Okay, and even go down to the operations. Okay, so basically we make a very fast move, because when the first beginning of the MCO announced in early mid of March, a lot of our outlets, which is we can't really operate 100%. Okay, so some of the outlets had to be total closed by the authorities due to this COVID-19. So we need to really focus. We need to help our franchises. Okay, how basically we need to transfer the staff to the different outlets, right? And how basically we also need to help them to transfer the stock, so make sure that have to help them, right? Rather than they didn't know what to do and all these things. So we have to be really proactive for the operation team to help all our franchisees on this particular arrangement. And as for the operation also, when we know that sales going to be declined in a few months during the MCO period, and plus during this recovery period slowly picking up, all right, we need to also to reset on the budget and also the control, and how basically we try to minimize on the operation expenditure. So this is very important also. We have to guide our franchisees, basically how they are going to so-called handle these particular situations, right? And when we're running a chain, okay, as Mary Brown, not only in Malaysia but also in overseas, we need to have a proper systems to tackle this during this special this COVID-19 period. So we come up with the QA team and also training departments combined together to come up with to develop a COVID-19 preventive measure and guidelines for our all our restaurants overseas, and okay, how we basically communicate with them via a virtual training, and how we launch this particular new guidelines, which is helps basically for all our operations on the day-to-day operations, right? And also basically how we are talking about on the purchasing. Okay, on the purchasing part, basically actually we have to make sure that when we are allowed to open to operate during the MCO period, so we need to make sure that all our suppliers have sufficient stocks to be delivered to all our outlets, including all the remote areas, right? And this is also very important. And not only talking about the raw materials items, we're also talking about something new, is the PPE items, right? All the personal protective equipment, so is it the basic one like a mask, and also all the hygiene substance has to be ready and has to be enough and delivered to all the outlets, because all our people need to have this in order for them to run the business, all right? And as for the business development portions, we also assist our franchisee to talk to approach all the landlords, okay, to get for the rental waiver in this period. And most important also, we're also talking about how basically the human resource department helps a lot on the managing people and also labor during this difficult period. So we also need to have a very constant communications and also follow up with the Ministry of Human Resource, because we need to have a proper guide to our franchisees out there, basically how they need to manage on the salary, okay, to make sure that every end of the month, okay, there's a staff, they have their own monies and all this thing. So we also need to check on the so-called on the status of the how basically they can manage on their annual leave or unpaid leave, and also negotiation on the win-win situation on this arrangement. And we also work closely with the so-called how basically we can provide a very good guidelines from the PKPB, all right, which is talking about the ERP program and also the wages subsidy program, which is we believe that all our franchisees are really need and really appreciate on our guidance. And also basically how we are also talk to all our people a bit about how they can apply on the PKPB experience. All right. On the marketing portion, we already come out with the 2020 marketing yearly calendar, and this is before the COVID-19 or the pandemic things happen. But with this current scenario, we know that actually there's a lot of the restrictions, okay, in terms of marketing, but nevertheless, actually, we also take these new directions, okay, by leverage a lot of things, especially to how that we can embrace on the digitalizations on most of our marketing activities, and basically how we are focusing more on delivery. As we know, there's a lot of people currently, there's a lot of delivery players, there's a new delivery players coming, all these things. So basically how we can engage with them. And when before during this COVID-19, actually it's down the lines, we only about 50% of our stores which are they're doing a delivery. But when we know that that's going to be a new thing, okay, so we are quickly convert all of the outlets, okay, try to implement all the delivery, okay, and try to launch all the delivery to all our outlets nationwide. And we also invest a lot of money on throw a lot of money in terms of like giving a discount, okay, basically how we can enhance and try to engage with the food blogger for every new promotion that we launch during this pandemic period, right? And also that basically how we can also engage with Insta famous. So I think this is pretty much something new, but during this COVID-19, so it's really helps us because a lot of people know that they are focusing more on the social medias and all these things. So this is something which is it really works, and we can see really the impact on our revenue. as Mary Brown, we are doing a franchise business, so we know that's actually a part of our objective is also the growth of our franchise by come up with new outlets, expand our outlets locally and also in overseas. But with this restriction of movements and so forth, and we also know there's a lot of exhibitions has been postponed this year and even carry next year and all these things. So it's not going to be a full stop for us to keep continue on promoting and let people know about our franchise opportunities. We engage with our franchise marketing by come up with the franchise opportunities and blast our franchise information through social media. We never know that actually we thought that we give a very minimum target that, okay, I'm not sure how people are going to respond if we put our information franchise through Facebook or through Instagram. But seriously, there's the huge numbers of people are coming back to us and they feel so much interested about to know more about our franchise things, and they start to engage with them to do on the Zoom presentations, when also line up with them a few numbers of appointments that we're going to be set up right after the MCO period. So I think this is also a good approach. So it's nothing to be stopped or nothing to be worried. Okay, the expansion has to be go on. So we are really grateful with this opportunity. So I think this is also a good thing that for all the franchise players out there to look into it as well. Okay, as the commitment from the franchisor part, so we, as what mentioned earlier by our two panelists before, saying that okay, how basically we can also help our franchisees by give a waiver on the royalty and also advertising, even though not that really much because we know the revenue is not going to be so great compared to previous year, but at least give them a room for them to breathe. Okay, and also as the Malaysia companies, okay, we also would like, we also Mary Brown engage and do a lot of how we can give back to the societies, right? So we know that we try to do more on our activity through our Mary Brown charity foundations by giving a lot of to provide the food to our frontliners. Okay, not only in Klang Valley but in many places in Malaysia. And we also feel so grateful that a lot of our franchisees, they also come approach us and they also would like to participate with this activity. So as I mentioned to you, Mary Brown growth is never stopped even during this COVID-19 period. We managed to open 3 stores during these 3 months. So this is something which is a lot of people be asking how you can really open 3 stores during this COVID-19 period. But as I say, that actually it's come from a lot of efforts from our team. Okay, and we also believe that actually there's nothing impossible that we can do during this period. Okay, business must go on. So, but of course, we need to really adapt on something new norm that we believe is going to be impact to our business. Okay, with that, I think I would like to, there's a very short so-called sharing sessions that I would like to share with you guys here. And I don't want to take so much time of eating. So I think I'll give back to you, Prof. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cairo, for your sharing. So we have more time for question and answer. To our participant, if you have any questions, please write your questions at the question and answer sections of this webinar. If you have any question, while waiting for the question, I would like to so please write your question at question and answers. I will read for you. Okay, panels, unmute your, okay, so while waiting for question, okay, so what happened for the past 3 months is really changing the landscape of this, only the health crisis, but also social and economic crisis, yeah? So what have you learned? Yeah, what have you learned, like very important lesson learned for what has happened, that now you are ready to make a very important change either in your franchise business operation or in any aspect of your operation. So maybe Derek and Khairul can answer very specific to your own business, and Madam Sian can also share some important thought that kind of feedback you got from industry players. Important lesson learned. Okay, maybe we start with Derek.
Okay, important lesson. We actually learned a lot during these 3 months, over the last 3 months, and then I believe the coming months will be also there will be new learnings every day. So, but what we actually really learn is that no matter what happened in the situation of COVID-19 in F&B, especially towards this. We are facing we are the so-called also part of the frontliners, right? The food and F&B players. We do not compromise on the food quality, even though we know that we are actually facing a lot of challenges of economic scales and spending behavior, right? But we still have to hold really to that we have to serve the best food so that the customers will still be out there to support you. So we shouldn't be changing the business landscape. This is different, but then the offerings, the products quality has to be there. So we should stand firm on that kind of measures.
Okay, thank you, Derek. What about Mary Brown? Important lesson for what happened in 3 months. Everything changed.
Yes, what we can see actually, of course, there is the revenue is being impacted quite badly during the first month of the lockdown period. But after that, we are focusing more on the sales opportunity, basically, because we can see that actually with this COVID-19 situations, we also learn we learn something new on the pattern of how the consumer behave, all right, and basically how we can really gel with them and to understand more what actually they need during this particular time. So we take this opportunity and how basically we work together with our team and to what do you call this, to focus more on what are the things that we can plan ahead, okay, by come up with new things, okay. Even that we're also talking about how basically, okay, talking about the development of the new outlets, okay. Previously, we only spent like say 1 million just to open one restaurant. So people say, oh, it's not going to be happening for the next 6 months, you know. So a lot of people are worried about the investment. So basically, we also look into the small footprint or how we can bring down on the investment cost, something like this. So it's something new thing that we can look into these particular things, and we know that's actually which is very seriously going to be in fact the direction that we're going to move from now on.
Okay, Ms. Sian, if you want to say something about that.
I guess the one thing that is very evident to me is the adaptability and the flexibility of franchisors. The importance is the fact that, for instance, right now we are talking to a lot of F&B players, but in education, there's also a lot of pivoting that has been going on. A lot of schools are now online learning. I'm sure that has also become a very new norm. For instance, children, especially in Singapore, education is such an important thing, right? So a lot of children who used to have tuition in the physical premises of their tuition centers now actually have their tuition online, and a lot of them are finding it very easy to adapt because of course they're young. At the same time, the teachers, the tuition teachers have also pivoted, and I really wonder if there is a need for all the students to get into a tuition center in the future. So basically, new businesses have also sprouted out. People have changed the way they run their business. And I think that maybe in the example of tuition teachers, there may be a winner because now they don't even need premises. What they need to do is to curate their online material how they conduct their trainings. So I would say that from a business model perspective, people need to adapt and change to what consumers can accept and what they will need, and then be surprised. The audience can respond very quickly as well. Now, the other thing that I wanted to say was the communication. The other day, I was listening to a webinar where George Ang of A&W was saying that F&B is a business of 500 small things on a daily basis. So I guess the other thing is to be able to manage all the different processes that are part of your business on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, so that the quality can be controlled and managed across time.
Okay. So we have received question from the audience. Maybe this question is for Madam Wong Jini. I'll read it out. What action should be taken if there is a franchisee want to terminate their franchise agreement during this period?
Right. Thank you so much for the question. I think this is one of the common questions during this difficult period. I think the first thing that the franchisor would look at is, has the franchisee communicated officially, in the sense that they have sent in a letter to indicate they would like to terminate, or they are merely talking in an informal setting. If there has been an official letter, then of course the franchisor would need to look at the cause. Is it within the good cause provision under the franchise agreement? If it's not, then it's a good idea for the franchisor to reach out to the franchisee to find out what is the reason. Sometimes, based on what we have seen during these 3 months, especially during the initial period, I think there's this fear, unknown of what is going to happen. So it's an immediate reaction that they just want to get out. But if you see that over time, they see that there's a recovery, the chance of recovery, they may change their mind. So it's a time to engage with them. So I think the question is a very valid one. So it depends on how the franchisee has communicated. If it's official, then you have to actually respond in an official manner. Yeah, because if it's an official notice that I want to terminate based on this provision, then the franchisor should respond in an official manner to say that yes, we accept, or no, there's no valid reason. Okay, so that's an answer that I can provide.
Okay, okay, thank you, Madam Wong. All right, so okay, before I go into this question, I would like to pose a question to Madam Sien.
Yes.
In one of your way forward, you mentioned about quick revenue recovery. Yeah, it's very important. You mentioned about quick revenue recovery. What are some of the in a franchise? Yeah, what are some of the technique or actionable or some of the ways of how firms can actually, the revenue recovery?
Well, one of the things that we mentioned earlier was from Derek, right, and Karul. What they were talking about was actually understanding what the customers need. And what Derek and Nahanta Fish Market had done was actually to engage the people with better takeaway packets, easy for people to engage, and contactless products. So the micro segmentation is very important. Understanding who is the customer. For instance, in Singapore, we have a steak place that actually lost a lot of business. But what they did was, instead of selling the steak sit down, because a steak, that's the only way you can sit is the way they cook it, right? Fresh. What they did was they prepared the salad, the dressing, and everything, and they charged a whopping 80 Singapore dollars per serving. And people were still buying that and bringing it home and serving it freshly cooked by themselves at the same price as they would buy if they were sitting in the restaurant, except without service charge. And people actually found the experience better. So people are actually finding different ways. So another client of mine actually used to supply baked goods to all the different outlets. Instead, he quickly set up on Shopify a supply chain, and immediately managed to market his products online and managed to actually not get back all their sales because he used to supply to all the different F&B outlets, but he did manage to get at least 60% of his business back, which I think was a quick revert. And then at the same time, right, earlier I talked about local last mile delivery. So what's happening now is the franchisor also actually then set up a marketing platform for his baked goods, and then he used his franchisees as the delivery point for all his baked goods as well. And Singapore is so small, and I think that Malaysia will have even more opportunities for such activities. But this means that the franchisor has to take the lead in marketing. Yes, not everything is going to be successful, and I talked about turnaround time of 2 to 3 days. You know, that means that you have to try and see and use data to see whether this works or not. If it doesn't work, you know what? The job of the franchisor again is to think of new ideas and pivot as fast as possible, so that the franchisees can see that the franchisor is doing something to help them with their revenue. Besides the good act of trying to waive royalties and fees and stuff like that. Those are what the franchisor can do. But you know what? We don't want to reduce the pot. We are trying to increase the pot, and we need to get revenue flowing into the economy. If the revenue doesn't flow, situation for everybody from the consumer to the business owner to the economy to the government, it's all cyclical. So we all need to do our part to actually stimulate the consumption of our customers, and we have to help them. We have to help ourselves so that we can actually reach out to our consumers in a more efficient, quicker, sensitive way. And so I think that being flexible, adaptable, and with the ears on the ground, and also listening to our franchisees, because our franchisees also have ideas, and we need to take that and be flexible about how they think they can also adapt to their environment. Because remember, we're talking about hyper localization now. So maybe your franchisee may have other people that they want to collaborate with within their area. In the past, it would be no, you cannot do that. But now I would encourage franchisors to listen a little bit more and see if really the answer is a no. Maybe it's a maybe. If it's a maybe, you should try.
Okay. All right. So we have here one question. Okay. Tanya. Okay. Can act of God in force measure be used for COVID-19 situation if epidemic or pandemic is not part of the? Yeah.
Interesting question. Thank you, Prof. So far, you know, basically act of God normally would refer to events of natural disasters, like earthquake, you know, like catastrophic weather condition. We have never seen an epidemic considered as act of God. So I would say, unless it's, you know, determined as such by the courts, I personally do not think it would. You will look at your agreement and maybe see events beyond the reasonable control or expectation of either party. You know, if normally, even if there's act of God, those phrases may actually be found in a force majeure. So maybe you can actually invoke that provision or that clause, that phrase to cover pandemic or epidemic.
Okay. So if participant, if you have any further question on that one, maybe you can ask more detailed question. We have still we have time. See if there is any question at question and answer section. Okay, so we have one question here. During this pandemic time, is it suitable for recruiting the franchisee? If yes, is there any tips that you can share? So maybe question to Mr. Khairul and Mr. Derek. Derek, maybe you can start first. Is it a suitable time to recruitment?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think recruitment of franchise businesses, there's actually there's no specific timing that say whether we can or cannot recruit. as long as there is, as long as your brand is ready and stable, I mean, the process of negotiation will take some time. Buying a franchise brand will not, it's not like buying I mean, you buying tons of materials or products, but this is actually a negotiation where the business undertaking will actually come into a few stages. So by the time we complete all these negotiations during this COVID-19, if there's any inquiries, then we can actually space out and plan out the onboarding or even the planning of opening of the restaurants of the shops later stage, which is okay. But then if there's any good potential inquiries, we should be still taking them, recruiting them. In fact, from our side, we also have actually a few inquiries during this time of the COVID-19 from other countries. So I believe people are looking at the near future after the COVID-19 issues, what will happen, which is why I said that during this economic recession, franchising sales should be even better. After this, people are looking at opportunity to become their own boss. So that's my thoughts.
Any short?
Yes, I think it's also correct. It's what they said now. Actually, to be honest, during this COVID-19 period, during MCO period, actually, many people out there actually already also look into the opportunities that how they can really diversify their existing business is something which is, I think, can be work during any conditions and all these things. So I think for us, we have to be so grateful because during this tough time, it doesn't really stop us to continue grow and also continue for us to receive applications from the potential franchisee out there, and also to continue to develop our strategy and also marketing for the franchise marketing.
Okay, thank you. That's a very sharp and short answer. Hopefully, it will be able to answer questions on whether it's the right, to recruit. Okay, this is. I think we should go for these two important questions. Is there any direction or idea for Cloud Kitchen to be franchised? Carol, Derek, or Madam Sian would like to say something on this Cloud Kitchen. Derek?
Okay. So definitely the answer is it is something that we in Malaysia probably is something new. This terms or this concept is probably rather new, but in other countries, even in Singapore, in other countries, I believe this is not so new. But it's just that how people accepting, especially during this COVID-19, or even actually we planned this ghost kitchen or so-called virtual kitchens before COVID-19. It's just that as many plans that we have spaced it out probably towards the middle of the year, this year, to launch it. But because of this pandemic, we actually launched it earlier. And while launching it, there's a lot of learning and also streamlining needed to do. For example, if you are putting a ghost kitchen into your existing other brands, there's a lot of considerations needed to be done in terms of menu offerings, in terms of capacity of your kitchen, in terms of the location that you are going to have that kind of kitchen, virtual kitchen, where should you put it, and then there are so many checkpoints that you need to do. But of course, the answer why we are doing this is because one of the great reason is because we are trying to help to build the business for franchisee as well, because we know that if we can have another brand in the same area or same restaurant where they can actually spend lesser in terms of opening a new outlets at this point of time, that will be easier for them to stay on, to sustain their business with another set of business or branding that they can actually grab back the pie of the market first. So then after that, when stable down, they can still continue to open Manhattan Fish Market, second, third outlet later. But then this will give them a new opportunity or new segment to actually carry out the business expansion development. So I believe it is franchisable. It's just that there is a need for the SOP to be done up correctly in terms of inventories. You cannot carry too many inventories because there are two different brands. But these are all the considerations that we are doing before we can even launch what kind of products you want to sell.
Okay, thank you, Derek. Mr. Cairo, you can also address at the same time the concept of ghost kitchen, and you can also cover on this one, especially in terms of the cost. Yeah. Mr. Cairo.
Sorry?
Yeah, while responding on the previous question, you can also address the concept of ghost kitchen.
Well, maybe I can say something about the ghost kitchen. This is Derek shared from a existing brand concept.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. You was frozen just now.
Okay, yes, there you go.
With, Madam Sien, then later we come back to you, Carol.
Oh no, actually, I was just filling the airspace, right? But there are actually quite a few brands who actually function out of those kitchens and started off as a franchise already. So we, goes back to the concept of the last mile delivery. So when you have actual ghost kitchens and you space it out and you set it up in a COVID post-COVID pandemic friendly way, you can actually supply new product offerings to the consumers in different locations so that you can actually do that last mile delivery. So the franchise in itself may not necessarily be about the brand, the location, the ambience. It's really about brand identification, brand recognition, and obviously the focus on the quality of the product becomes even more important. So if they are actually from the other end, instead of a brand actually including new concepts, sometimes it's also a kitchen being repurposed so that they can serve new brands and new offerings where the consumer is the winner. And right now, we need the consumer to kickstart our entire economy.
Okay, Carol, if you would like to add anything?
Actually, we already started with the concept of this we call it cloud kitchen since last year, but we started here in Klang Valley. The reason because we want to penetrate our market segment in this particular region, and you know that actually this is something like our test to this new concept that can be implemented here, and also how they can blend to our brand. The thing also, the reason why a lot of people would actually invest in this particular ghost kitchen is also talking about the cost, the investment cost, which is much lower. But at the same time, also we also need to think about basically how this ghost kitchen can really help to reach our customers out there, and also how basically the quality of the food it can be sustainable, and it has to be look good. So this is also a very important thing. So we look into this as our trial project, and I think it's going to be something that's going to be developed, and also going to be quickly. It's going to be flourishing in the whole Malaysia soon.
Thank you, Mr. Cairo, for your sharing, for answering the question. We have now come towards the end of the webinar. Again, I would like to express congratulations to Ministry of Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs and Malaysia Franchise for organizing this seminar. Also, a very big thank you to the panelists for sharing your knowledge, experience that I'm sure will be very useful for the industry players out there. And awesome participant, we have more than 100 participants, and the MFA Secretariat will email to the slide. So with that, thank you so much, and we end our webinar today, and see you again in another webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.